to Meta then.
Okay, I don't have a question. I
Sure.
have a comment, just to kick the discussion off a little bit. Because we have some decisions tonight, I understand. So in all of the scenarios from the base to all the alternatives, what I see is a true great concentration on East Arlington. And that's in part because we have two major corridors there, and therefore we have, we have two corridors with the higher proposed, and then this offset of 250 or 350 or whatever to either direction. And so for the streets in between Mass Ave and Broadway, they really have a very radical and drastic rezoning. And I have noticed since I was away that all of Arlington Heights along Mass Ave has dropped off the map. And I would like to spend some time discussing how we can further pare back the neighborhood multifamily subdistrict in East Arlington, and as far as well, I have a proposal about that I would like to offer. But my point is that East Arlington is overburdened in terms of school districts, in terms of parking, compared to the rest of Arlington. And there are two major corridors there, and in addition to that, it is almost entirely R2, which is one of Arlington's multifamily zones. So it's already built out to two-family, 2.5 stories, which in practicality really is 3 stories, because every building I know in my neighborhood has dormered out the entire 3rd floor. So I would like to propose that we further scale back the pink or the neighborhood multifamily in East Arlington to the extent that we remove it entirely.
Sorry, folks, I lost my mute button there for a second. Okay.
Yes.
I would, if I could just make a quick comment about that.
Sure.
If we're talking about removing the pink, let me go back to this version. If we remove the pink entirely here, we don't have a contiguous district. In other words, the blue on its own cannot meet the definition of contiguity.
That's fine, Matthew. I think you can figure it out. It's a design problem.
Yeah, we can figure it out now. We have faith, Matthew.
That's not a reason. That's not a good enough reason.
So I actually disagree. I think a question about how much neighborhood sub-district belongs in East Arlington is a valid is something we can discuss, but I don't think that we should be losing all of the neighborhood sub-district in East Arlington. I think there is value to a mix of types and tenures, but a mix of building types throughout the entire town. And as you say, there are a lot of two families, so the truth is that a lot of those are not going to get converted anyway.
Right, so why waste our time rezoning them? And I would also say,
why lose the opportunity?
Because it's not a good opportunity, and I'll tell you why. As an architect, I'll tell you that it is highly unlikely that anyone will demo a 2-family in order to build a 3-family. what they will do is they will graft on some additional half stories and other largely unattractive things in order to make it grow. I've seen it time and time again. I know exactly how this will play out. We will end up with basement apartments in increasingly flooding, zones, and we will end up with, these kind of awkward add-ons on top to that will cause a what is currently a very consistent, architecturally consistent urban fabric to become kind of like a bunch of it, a lot of alien kind of situations. So I don't think we'll get much housing out of it, and I think what we will get out of it is a lot of subpar architectural solutions.
So what I think,
Folks, none of us can hear anything on Zoom when you do that, so I'm going to ask you to stop.
as a developer, I think what will happen is that people will identify lots like this one, or 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 this one, that most of which are up against commercial areas, commercial districts, or business districts that are a little bit larger, and put 12 unit, 15 unit buildings on them.
What? On that 5,000 square foot parcel?
On that parcel, on that parcel,
Yeah,
on that parcel, on that parcel, on that parcel.
Okay, good. You just identified a bunch.
Sanjay and Netta are, not Sanjay, Shayna and Netta are looking at a map and identifying specific lots, which is what you can't see, but it's a point of discussion to them.
So what I'm getting at is many of these lots, you're correct, are likely not developable. Now, is it unheard of that two lots next to each other come up at the same time? It's not unheard of. I wouldn't expect it to happen. Does that mean that there are not appropriate lots scattered throughout? No, there are appropriate lots scattered throughout, and I wouldn't want to lose the opportunity just because many of the lots are not appropriate. I wouldn't want to lose the opportunity to take advantage of the appropriate lots that are there.
I see that Vince has his hand up, so I'm going to look to add him to the discussion here.
Thanks, Sanjay. I think one thing that I took from Meta, from your remark, is that by pulling the Arlington Heights district out of the proposal, it does create a feeling that it's imbalanced. I wouldn't use the term burdened, but it creates the feeling that East Arlington would be getting both the benefits and any burden that this would cause. And in a way, we're kind of putting our faith in the ARB's promise that the ARB is going to be looking at the Heights and developing a district that will create a unified commercial area. And I'm just curious if we could get an update maybe from Steve as the ARB representative who's in the room. Has the ARB had any further discussion? I'm also curious to know if Capitol Square has come up in terms of taking some commercial parcels out or adding some commercial parcels to the MBTA community zone. Has that discussion come in any further or not in the past few weeks?
So, in terms of the Arlington Heights Business District, we have not, the Arlington Redevelopment Board has not discussed this in any of our recent meetings. So I would say that, I believe it is still a future work. There's also a desire to do similar, kind of a similar consistency, or there's also a desire to do, to look at the center and Capitol Square in a similar way, but that's, further off in the future.
Okay, Claire, you might be able to add to that as well.
Sure, I'm happy to add a little to this, and I apologize in advance for spotty Wi-Fi. So the ARB last winter identified a suite of zoning articles they wanted to look at for last spring's town meeting, and there were quite a few on there related to business zoning mostly. And so at this year's spring town meeting, they only put 3 of those out because they were administrative and shouldn't have engendered too much discussion. At least these are the ARB generated bylaw changes. The discussion at the time was, let's look at Arlington Heights Business District. We have a little bit of a mandate there from our Arlington Heights neighborhood plan that was done in 2019. One of the recommendations from there was make one district that would be the Arlington Heights Business District, rather than having, again, as we all know everywhere, a bit of a hodgepodge of B1, B2, B3, B4, all in one area. Let's do one Arlington Heights Business District and set zoning for that district. So there was a lot of work. There's been a lot of background work done. There's a lot of prep for that article that's already been done. I think it's up to the ARB at this point if they want to bring it forward as part of the fall town meeting or the spring town meeting. But this was something that was sort of on the books even before MBTA communities kicked off.
I would like to ask if Laura, Rebecca, or Steve would support me in scaling back the neighborhood multifamily subdistrict in East Arlington.
So scaling back or eliminating? Those are different questions.
Okay, I'll go there. I'll go with scaling back.
Okay, so all along, we've never approached this on a lot by lot basis. And I've always presumed that we are working under the premise that lots will be redeveloped if they make sense to be redeveloped because the owner decides that that space would be effectively multifamily. And I assumed that any lot that's in this overlay, which does not meet a criteria of being reasonable to redevelop as multifamily, won't be. So if we wanted to look at this on a lot by lot basis, I think I would be supportive of scaling back, and we would try to identify those lots that have the highest probability of ever being desirable for multifamily development. But that seems to me a rather different approach than we've taken all along.
That's not what I'm suggesting.
No, you're suggesting that we just unilaterally scale back with no particular sense as to what's likely to be redeveloped and what's not likely to be redeveloped because the lots aren't suitable for multifamily redevelopment.
Incorrect. I am an architect and also a developer. I know what is likely to be redeveloped and not likely, and I already made the point that an existing 2-family is not likely to be redeveloped. So why change the zoning in all of those areas if it's not likely to be redeveloped?
And that's exactly my point. Are we going to go through and identify those lots that are currently single family versus those that are 2-family and just pull out the single family ones for inclusion in the overlay?
It's very simple. East Arlington is almost entirely R2.
Well then, why aren't we, except for the fact that we do have to have a 50% contiguous area, just doing Mass Ave and Broadway?
That's what I'm saying.
But this is so farly different from what you originally came to.
No, it's not.
I must have misunderstood what you were trying to do several meetings ago.
Yeah, I came with a proposal several meetings ago that had no inner block lots in East Arlington.
And what about the ones on the other side of Mass Ave and Broadway?
Yeah, only in the case where they were R1.
Which would mean going through and piecemealing, identifying.
Not piecemealing, the zoning map already
Laura or Steve, did you have anything to add here?
I would just, first of all, I'm very taken aback with this proposal, so I don't even know what I really think. But I am concerned about the contiguous problem, the contiguity problem. And I think that I could see scaling back, but not limiting, because I do like the idea of the possibility of combining lots and making larger developments. And that one of the things that I am concerned about is just that the lots are so small. So many of those lots, even the ones on Mass Ave, are so small. So I would, in some of the areas where there's like four, like where the pointer is right now, like where there's 4 lots, I could see doing maybe just 1 or 2 of those lots. That could be workable. But I don't want to get rid of it completely because of, like, look at what's along Broadway there and how small those lots are. There's, there could be an opportunity to build a little bit more efficiently if we included at least one level of pink.
I think that would be a reasonable compromise, that there is the 4-story blue, and then to transition, it's sort of 1 lot in, or maybe 2 to transition. But what we started with as a base scenario went in as many as 7 or 8 lots.
Right. But that's not what we're talking about.
That's not what we're talking about, but we're still talking about quite a big depth. And when it comes down to Palmer and Wyman Street, it's the whole street.
Right. So what you're proposing is more, we moved from 350 to 250. Now you'd like to go more like 150 or 100?
Yeah, less. Something significantly less.
Matthew, what would that do with the contiguity if we were to keep, I'm looking at, like say Harlow Street in that area where there's nothing on Mass Ave, but if we kept 1 or 2 parcels in going north,
Well,
east,
remember,
west.
it's contiguous across the street also.
Yeah, I don't know how that gets calculated.
We could fiddle with it. I mean, it would feel a little gerrymandered, to be honest, but we might need to sort of capture a parcel or 2 back here and there just to keep the connections. I will also look into whether we do need contiguity here, because if we break this section up, well, there's 2 variables. If we break this section up, it has to be small enough that the other cluster to the west is at least 50% of the total area.
You said that was possible.
I think if we put this on let me go to the table. It's a kind of a math problem. So right now the East Arlington, combined in this scenario is, let's call that about 5,000-ish. And the center and the heights are less than 3. So in other words,
is it area or acreage?
It's district.
Is it acreage or capacity that the 50% has to be?
I think the 50% is both.
Oh, either. Okay.
But because we're applying the rules evenly, I think acreage will translate to approximately units. But that's a good question. So in this scenario, the center and the heights is, call it, I don't know, 2,500 or so, right? We would have to reduce the East Arlington portion by over a half in terms of area in order to break it up. Or we can sort of put it on a further diet, take it back, no parcels, or, for instance, here's a stretch where you wouldn't have to take it back. Maybe we can cross the street and sneak across another. So you see the sort of game we might have to play.
Yes, and my initial point was that it's too highly concentrated in East Arlington, so putting the center on a diet isn't.
No,
gonna
I think he was. I think he was referring to East.
East, sorry.
I think, right?
I mean,
Yep.
conceptually, I've been concerned about us pushing into these side streets and having the current housing there feeling overwhelmed by larger, taller buildings. So, I'm not opposed to trimming the pink, but I think you have to keep some of the pink. And then the question is, at what height do you keep some of the pink?
We haven't. Vince has had his hand for a little while, and I wanted to give Steve a chance to weigh in because he hasn't yet. So I'm going to go to Steve first, and then I'll come to you, Vince. Okay?
So, I don't support eliminating the neighborhood district from East Arlington entirely. There are basically two reasons. Several reasons. One is that, we are looking at, the future, decades in the future. Another is, I agree that, with what we have to put back, it would end up looking kind of gerrymandered and squirrely. One of the, thinking back to a previous public engagement, the meeting in June, there were a lot of questions about, why wasn't Broadway included? I could see scaling back Broadway, just taking the boundary and moving it west. But, or perhaps making the Mass Ave section a little slimmer, but I'm not in favor of removing it entirely.
When you say Broadway, do you mean pink and blue?
Yeah.
Everything?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Not just pink?
correct.
Vince.
Thanks. I think I agree with Meta that I'm confident that we could find a way to tweak the map somehow to get a compliant district in terms of contiguity. I'm sure it would be a little gerrymandered. I think the larger question is, is the feedback that we've been getting driving us in this direction? And, I think eliminating a huge part of the district would, it would satisfy the group of people who want us to do something that's sort of technically compliant, but that wouldn't actually lead to much new housing. I think that, one of the things that we've been trying to respond to is the need for a variety of housing types in Arlington. And so we have a Broadway, Mass Ave district that might lend itself to apartment buildings of a certain size where we might get some affordable housing units under our affordable housing overlay by law. But the neighborhood district is important too, because it creates a buffer. It creates housing types like 3 families that, are also important. We have to remember that Arlington in 1970 had 20% more people than it does today. And it didn't have more housing units, but it had larger families and more people living in the same houses. And now we might have a 2-family house, but there might be, a single person living in one of those units or a couple with no children, which is fine, but those people don't have, housing options if they want to downsize, retirees or young families, without children. I think that one of the things we've heard consistently is that we want a range of housing options, and having a range of 2 different types of districts helps accomplish that. So I would agree with Steve that I wouldn't support eliminating the neighborhood district.
Thank you.
Ed has her hand up.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Anna.
East Arlington already has a range of housing types, a large range, the biggest range of town. What doesn't have a range is the center and the heights. So I don't know how we got here where all of this focus is on East Arlington. This is exactly why I joined the group and what I hoped wouldn't happen, and here we are. A range of housing types is awesome. I live in a 2-family. I totally support it. It's just you're putting too much here in this small section of Arlington. So I'm offering solutions. I know that I can rally hundreds hundreds of
So I have
families
a-
to oppose this. Okay.
I have a thought, Meta, of how
Yeah.
to move forward here. Right. One way is to if we compare this to the base map, right? Can someone bring the base for East Arlington? I forget who's controlling the slides right now. Right. We're giving it a pretty big diet from what we originally proposed. I'm not opposed to trimming it a bit more. I think that one of the other things that's creating a bit of the feeling of imbalance between what we're doing here is if we look at Mass Ave west of the center, we'll see that our rule of excluding commercial and industrial has sort of left us with only one side of Mass Ave, right? Whereas in East Arlington we don't have quite as much of that, and so we have quite a bit. One thing we could do, which I think actually would make a fair bit of sense, might be to continue back to the Lexington line as we did originally, right? We'd have to add probably another parcel there to get across Mass Ave, right? And get us down, continuing with our 350 feet all the way to the Lexington line. And we could sort of keep what we have here for west of the center and do the trim, or maybe even a bit extra trim that we're talking about for the east side of that. And I think that might feel more. I'm asking the working group whether that might feel a bit more like achieving what we've both been setting out to do and what we've heard from folks. I see Vince's hand.
Thanks, Sanjay. I'll pass. I was actually listening deeply to what you were saying and forgot my comment.
Sanjay, I just have a clarifying question. Are you proposing that we stay with 250 feet off of Mass Ave, west of Pleasant Street, and then east of Pleasant Street, we reduce even further to say 150 feet or 100 feet or whatever? Was that your proposal? Am I understanding what you're recommending?
My recommendation is to stay with the base picture, so what we have in front of us right here. So this is the base scenario that we presented on what we're calling the base today, right, which was what presented on July 25th, right? I'm suggesting we keep what we have west of Pleasant Street and
350 feet.
to 350 feet and go and add to the Lexington line, right, around outside of the what the proposed business district, right? So if somebody pointed, right, you'd have to go around the business district to get across Park Ave, right? But then, we'd have some parcels to include to get us to the Lexington line.
Okay.
Okay. And then, right, what we could do in East Arlington is either go to what's in the A1, A2 picture, right? If we, whoever's presenting, if you could go to that slide, the East Arlington A1, A2, you can see it's, quite a bit trimmed down. Or, if we want to trim it a bit more, I'm not hearing from the working group as a whole an appetite to eliminate completely. But I guess the question is, would you be open to what I'm suggesting west of the center, paired with either this trim or a slightly additional trim? And Matthew, you can tell me if I'm saying anything that's going to cause us problems.
No, I think there's a trim possible here, and I'd say I'd like to come up with some sort of rule that's at least sort of rigorous, but I'm guessing it's a parcel or two, mostly two, taken off of these edges, and let's call it 150 feet as a rule. I don't want to overly complicate this discussion, but there is maybe another way beyond just mapping, which is to say, for instance, these parcels are only limited to 3 families, right? There are other either use maximums or other kinds of constraints that could also be put into those places. So there's just another variable to consider. And my apologies for complicating the discussion.
I'd rather not. If we can
Okay.
reach a consensus, or not, if we can reach a decision without complicating further, I think that would be better. Let's move to Steve. Okay, yes, thank you, Rebecca, for your help with seeing the hands in the room.
Yeah, and can you, Matthew, can you get a slide that shows the entire town? Yep. Now, this is partially for Meta. You know, thinking back to, you know, in June, a number of people said, what about Broadway? We added Broadway, and maybe in retrospect, maybe we shouldn't have added Broadway. So how would you feel about taking out the district along the Broadway corridor? So you still have, you know, Mass Ave, and we can tinker with what's on Mass Ave, and then relocating it either, you know, as Sanjay said, more towards the Lexington line, like say around Lowell Street and Park Avenue extension, and possibly splitting some of it between like Gray Street and Mass Ave, you know, more towards, you know, just extending the south of Mass Ave part in Arlington Center a little south.
I might be open to that. I think that there is some value in redeveloping along Broadway. It's the inset part that I object to more, and so I would, as a sort of counter, would say, what if we got rid of the pink along Broadway? Because Broadway is a smaller street. We are talking about less density along Broadway. And so what it does in having, so here we have, so whereas over in the center, there's only one side of one major corridor, here we have four sides of two corridors.
Right. Yeah.
So this is where it's getting overburdened, right? And so particularly my street, Grafton Street, I've got it coming at me from both ends, and I'm in the middle. So, you know, I think it's just, we've just gone way too far.
Okay, so you're to make sure I've understood, you're thinking along Broadway, eliminate the neighborhood district.
Yeah.
So leave the blue, eliminate the pink.
Yeah.
And the pink is relocated.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, can we have a motion?
Well,
Okay, I make a motion to eliminate the neighborhood district along Broadway, both sides, and relocate it in the Heights or somewhere else.
Do you want to have the relocation attached to this?
No, I don't care where it goes.
Oh, so scratch the relocation part.
Yeah, fine.
Okay,
So-
I second that.
Before we go to vote on that motion, Vince has had his hand up, so I want to collect that, and then we'll figure out the motion and move forward.
Thank you. I mean, this is all very interesting. We're kind of horse trading parts of town. It seems to be in kind of reaction to this proposal that Meta has brought us, but without a whole lot of connection to the principles that have got us here. The principles that have got us here, I mean, I think the first one has to be transportation. This has always been about transportation corridors, the bus lines that serve Mass Ave and Broadway, and whether you live on Mass Ave or 2 blocks away from Mass Ave doesn't make that much difference in terms of the fact that you're close to transit, you're able to get around without necessarily having multiple vehicles, multiple automobiles. A second value has been proximity to commercial space. So in that sense, it makes some sense to have some multifamily housing around the Heights, but it doesn't make much sense to me to be taking it off of Broadway, which is close to not only commercial areas, but it's also close to transit and commercial in Cambridge and Somerville and so forth. So, you know, I just want to remind the group that we need to remember what we are, you know, kind of attempting to do, which is create development that is based around transportation. We're not necessarily trying to create 2 streets with tall buildings and then just nothing behind that. And so I'd like to remember that before we get too far or too excited with various motions.
Since I live there, there's nothing behind it.
I beg your pardon? Can you clarify?
Those streets are already fully built out.
So, I see Teresa's hand, and then we gotta figure out our motion here. And then, then we have other questions to figure out.
I just also want to, as Vince, just circle back to some of our priorities and some of the things that this group has done an excellent job of doing over the past several months. And one of those things is engagement. Many members of this group have been working really tirelessly to connect with residents and hear about priorities. And I think we have a good sense of what those are. And I just want to make sure that those voices that we've already heard from, the thousands of survey respondents, and as we know, surveys are a better way sometimes to reach people than attending evening meetings, especially for folks that are working, folks that have young children, etc. So thinking about those voices, some of the things that we've already clarified, and making sure that those end up on what is, going to be something that will impact the community for a long, long time to come. So I just wanted to second sort of Vince's idea to bring it more towards a bird's eye view of what we're doing right now. Thank you.
And finally, I understand the use of the word burden but I think that's awfully charged language when we're talking about potential future residents, being a burden. Those future residents could be our children, they could be from neighboring cities, they could be from somewhere else. I think we have to look at it as a combination of a challenge and an opportunity, and so I don't see burden as being the right word, even though I understand the feelings that are behind it.
So let's return to our motion here. I have one hopefully friendly amendment to it, and my suggestion is rather than to eliminate the neighborhood along Broadway, is that we keep basically a single parcel, just to make sure that we have the continuity, and also to give us the possibility for change in the future, so that if the ARB wanted to say add a property or two to a commercial zone along Broadway, we wouldn't be totally hemmed in on our compliance.
But Sanjay, I apologize for interrupting.
Yeah.
We're kind of working from a base, as you stated. Would it be possible to make motions in a sense that kind of incrementally moves away from our base, so that we wouldn't radically go to something that's kind of completely stripping down our proposal, that we kind of maybe take alternative A1 and do a vote on that, or the way you stated was the 350-foot distance on the west part of town and a 250-foot distance on the east part of town. That's kind of a first incremental step that we could vote on.
Well, 150, I thought.
Well,
We could start with
What's on the screen here looks like a 250-foot zone,
right.
if I'm not misunderstanding.
It's about 250.
Thank you.
I see what you're saying. So start with a vote on that, and then move. If that
So-
pass.
So I would move that. I think I understand what we're getting at, that we want something that's tight, that feels like the right size. So I would move that we we maintain the 350-foot zone west of Pleasant Street, and then east of Pleasant Street we adopt what's on the screen here, which is the 250-foot zone, including a neighborhood multifamily subdistrict.
Could I suggest that we just take west of Pleasant Street separately as its own thing?
I think we could do that, and I think we could start there, because I think I've heard a lot of agreement there. So let's perhaps, Vince, could you offer the Pleasant Street part or the west of Pleasant Street part of your motion?
Yeah, I move that we maintain the base essentially the distance, the 350-foot distance west of Pleasant Street.
And are you suggesting that we continue, ask UTL to continue to the Lexington line, or leave exactly what's there?
You know, I'm not suggesting necessarily that we continue to the Lexington line.
All right.
I second that.
Great. Let's go around. Do I remember what order I did the voting in? Vince.
Oh, well, yes.
Rebecca. Laura.
No.
Shayna.
Yes.
Meta.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
And Sanjay is a yes as well. So.
No, but that's okay.
No, you skipped Rebecca.
Oh, I thought I said Rebecca. I thought I said Rebecca at the very beginning of.
Yes, and I opened my mouth and never said anything.
Oh,
But
I
I'll be-
apologize. I thought I heard a yes. Rebecca.
Yes,
Okay.
that's okay.
I apologize. I really thought I heard a yes.
You just thought I was gonna say yes.
I'm glad I didn't get it. Anyway. Okay. So that's that settled. Let's now figure out what we're doing. What motion we have for the east. We had sort of two competing ones. Which one do we want to begin with? I think perhaps let's. I like Vince's suggestion to start with the very base that we have, and let's vote first on the, essentially what's on the screen here now, moving to the pink A1, A2, and then we'll do we'll consider a motion to thin even further. Does that sound? I would take a motion at this point to consider what's on the screen now, and then after that, with the expectation, I would accept a motion to thin further beyond that after.
You want a motion for 250 feet?
Essentially, yes, in East Arlington. Is that's what you were suggesting, right, Vince?
Yes, and I'll happily make the motion. So I would move that we do reduce the district to what we see on the screen, which is approximately 250 feet. And if I can just add a little commentary to my motion, I would say that I would expect that the ARB is going to take a little pass at this, where they might trim a few parcels here and there that they expect to make part of a future commercial district for East Arlington. So I don't see this as being, in any sense, overreach. I think this is a nice fit for the neighborhood. Apologies for the lengthy motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Now, can I remember the Vince?
Yes.
And Rebecca?
No.
No. Okay. Laura?
No.
Shayna?
Yes.
Meta?
No.
Steve?
I'm contemplating that there's gonna be another motion, and I might vote for this one and the other one. But I think instead of doing that, I'm gonna vote no.
Okay. And I'm going to vote yes, with the knowledge that there's another